Two chairs on a summer afternoon, one in the shade of a building, one in the shade of a tree. You have sat in both, and you already know the difference, a difference you have never been able to articulate beyond saying that the tree felt better. The temperature felt cooler, the air felt different on the skin, the quality of the light, the quality of the silence, the quality of the hour you spent there. All different, in ways that seem too subtle to explain and too consistent to dismiss. 5 measurable differences separate those two chairs: thermal, spectral, chemical, acoustic, and electromagnetic. In every dimension, the tree creates an environment that a building cannot replicate. Air beneath a tree is physically cooler, not because of shade alone, but because the tree is removing heat through a phase transition that no wall or roof performs. The light reaching your skin has been edited by the canopy, filtered through chlorophyll and leaf architecture, and what the canopy kept and what it removed is not random. Both of those mechanisms come first. What arrives after them includes a finding where synthetic tree compounds pumped into a hotel room. No forest, no visual beauty, no fresh air. Replicated the immune effect of spending a day among trees. Start with what the tree does to heat. One mature tree transpires, releases water vapor through microscopic pores in its leaves called stomata, at a rate of roughly 200 to 400 liters per day. This is not passive evaporation, the way a puddle dries in sunlight. It is an active biological process driven by the physics of water potential gradients. Water moves from the soil through the root system, up through the xylem, the network of hollow, dead cells that form the tree's vascular plumbing, and into the leaves. The driving force is not a pump, it is tension, negative pressure generated at the leaf surface as water molecules evaporate through the stomata. Each molecule leaving the leaf pulls the next one upward through cohesion, the hydrogen bonding between water molecules that allows a continuous column of water to be drawn from the roots to the canopy against gravity. In a tall tree, this column can be under tensions exceeding -15 atmospheres, a force strong enough to pull water 30 meters vertically through tubes narrower than a human hair. As each water molecule evaporates from the leaf surface into the surrounding air, it undergoes a phase transition from liquid to gas. That transition requires energy, specifically the latent heat of vaporization, approximately 2,260 joules per gram of water. Energy comes from the thermal environment, from the heat in the surrounding air, and from the solar radiation the leaf has absorbed. The water takes the heat with it as it becomes vapor. The air left behind is cooler. Scale matters here. A mature oak or beech, releasing 300 liters of water per day, is removing roughly 700,000 kilojoules of thermal energy from its immediate surroundings, equivalent to 2 household air conditioning units running continuously for 24 hours. Every street lined with mature trees is running a distributed cooling system powered by soil water, driven by solar energy, operating through the thermodynamics of phase transition. No electricity, no compressor, no refrigerant, water and sunlight and the physics of evaporation. Measurable consequence: air temperature beneath a tree canopy is 2 to 8 degrees Celsius cooler than air in direct sun, and, crucially, 2 to 4 degrees cooler than air in the shade of a building at the same location. The building blocks solar radiation, which reduces radiant heating of the air and ground beneath it. But the building itself, concrete, brick, steel, glass, has been absorbing solar radiation all day and re-radiating it as thermal infrared. The wall you stand beside in the shade of a building is warm. It is adding heat to the air it is supposed to be shading. Tree shade runs the opposite thermodynamics. It removes heat from the air through evaporation and reflects solar radiation from its leaf surfaces rather than absorbing and storing it. A concrete wall at 4 in the afternoon is releasing the thermal energy it absorbed at noon, radiating it back into the air as long-wave infrared that you feel as warmth on the shaded side of the building. A tree at 4 in the afternoon is still transpiring, still removing latent heat, still cooling the air column beneath its canopy. The thermal trajectories diverge throughout the day. The building shade gets warmer as the wall charges with heat. The tree shade stays cool or gets cooler as transpiration increases with temperature. You have felt this every time you have moved from building shade to tree shade on a hot day. and noticed that the quality of the coolness was different, that the tree shade felt cooler from inside the air itself rather than cooler because the sun was blocked. Notice it most sharply on the hottest days. In a Mediterranean afternoon in a park in August, walking from the shade of a stone wall into the shade of a plane tree, the temperature change is immediate and unmistakable. The stone wall shade felt warm, the tree shade felt cool. You attributed it to the breeze, or to your imagination, or to the psychological comfort of living things. The physics was simpler. The wall was radiating stored heat at you, and the tree was removing heat from the air around you. Your skin's thermoreceptors were detecting a real difference, not in radiant heat blocked, but in the thermal energy content of the air itself. Two different thermodynamic processes creating two measurably different environments. Urban heat islands. The phenomenon where cities are measurably hotter than surrounding rural areas is partly a story about the absence of this evaporative cooling. Cities have replaced transpiring canopies with heat, absorbing surfaces, asphalt, concrete, glass, steel. Every surface that replaced a tree replaced an evaporative cooler with a thermal battery, a structure that absorbs solar energy during the day and releases it as heat at night. Urban areas can be 3 to 5 degrees Celsius, warmer than nearby forested areas, and the primary mechanism is the loss of the latent heat of vaporization cooling that trees provide. Light is the second layer, and this is where the canopy reveals itself as something more sophisticated than a parasol. Canopy light is not reduced sunlight. It filters the solar spectrum selectively, based on the optical properties of chlorophyll and the architecture of the leaf itself. Chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B absorb strongly in two specific wavelength bands. The blue range around 430 nanometers and the red range around 660 nanometers. These are the photon energies that drive the light reactions of photosynthesis, captured by the pigment molecules in the thylakoid membranes of the chloroplasts. Green light, the wavelengths between 500 and 60 nanometers, is reflected, which is why leaves appear green. But the critical spectral feature of a leaf is what it does with near-infrared radiation. Wavelengths above 700 nanometers, the near-infrared range, pass through leaf tissue with remarkably little absorption. A single leaf transmits roughly 50% of incident near-infrared light and reflects another 40%. Less than 10% is absorbed. The reason is that these wavelengths carry photon energies below the threshold that chlorophyll can use for photosynthesis, so the leaf has no evolutionary reason to capture them. Multiple layers of leaves in a canopy reduce the near-infrared further, but even through a dense canopy, 30 to 50% of the incident near-infrared reaches the ground. Beneath a canopy, the light has been spectrally edited. Ultraviolet is reduced by 80 to 95%. Blue and red visible light are reduced by 80 to 90%, absorbed by chlorophyll. Green light is reduced by 60 to 70%. Near-infrared is reduced by only 30 to 50%. The light reaching your skin beneath a tree is enriched in near-infrared relative to every other part of the spectrum. The canopy has preferentially removed the short wavelengths and allowed the long wavelengths through. This is the finding that changed how I think about canopy shade. Because the near-infrared that the canopy allows through is the wavelength band that stimulates mitochondrial energy output. Cytochrome C oxidase, the terminal enzyme of the electron transport chain, absorbs light at 660 and 830 nanometers. The canopy removes the 660. Chlorophyll absorbs it for photosynthesis, but it transmits the 830 and the broader near-infrared band around it. Sitting under a tree, your skin is receiving near-infrared light that penetrates several centimeters into tissue and stimulates mitochondrial ATP output, while the UV that damages DNA and the high-energy visible light that causes photoaging have been filtered out by the chlorophyll above you. A canopy is not just shading you. It is selecting the wavelengths that reach you, removing the damaging frequencies, and passing the beneficial ones. No sunscreen does this. Sunscreen blocks UV, but also blocks the near-infrared that the mitochondria respond to. A building blocks everything equally, UV, visible, near-infrared, creating a spectrally depleted environment. Only a canopy provides selective spectral filtering that matches the absorption spectrum of the biological systems in your skin. The match is a consequence of the physics of chlorophyll absorption and the physics of tissue optics converging. Not designed, but the result for the person sitting beneath the canopy is a light environment optimized for their biology in a way that no manufactured shade achieves. Every time you chose the shade of a tree over the shade of a building, you were choosing a different electromagnetic environment, one that delivered the wavelengths your mitochondria use while removing the wavelengths that damage your DNA. The preference was not aesthetic. The physics was doing something different to your body in the two locations, and your body was responding to the difference. Dappled light adds another dimension. As leaves move in wind, the patches of sunlight that penetrate the canopy shift and flicker across the ground at frequencies between roughly 1 and 20 Hz. The visual cortex processes this natural flickering differently from steady light or from the 60 Hz flicker of artificial lighting. EEG measurements in subjects exposed to natural light flickering at these frequencies show increased alpha wave activity, the 8 to 12 Hz oscillatory state associated with calm alertness. Dappled canopy light induces the alpha shift through the visual channel, and the cortical result is reduced beta wave vigilance, increased integrative processing. The particular quality of ease that arrives when sitting under a tree on a breezy day, when the light is moving and the mind is still. 2 layers so far, and the person sitting in the chair beneath the tree is already in a measurably different thermal and spectral environment from the person in the chair beside the building. Cooler air, different light, different brainwave state. The 3rd layer operates through a channel neither person can see. Now the chemistry. Because the tree is not only filtering light and cooling air, it is manufacturing compounds and releasing them into the space directly beneath itself. Trees release volatile organic compounds, terpenes, primarily alpha-pinene A, beta-pinene A, limonene, and camphene, from their leaves and bark as part of their antimicrobial defense and intertree signaling system. These compounds are biogenic, synthesized by the tree's own metabolism from isoprene units, released through the stomata and through the bark surface, dispersed into the surrounding air. The quantities are substantial. A single hectare of coniferous forest releases roughly 10 kilograms of terpenes into the atmosphere on a warm summer day. Measured directly, subjects who spent 2 to 3 hours walking through a forest with high terpene concentrations showed a roughly 50% increase in natural killer cell activity. Blood samples drawn before and after the exposure confirmed the shift. Ching Li at Nippon Medical School in Tokyo ran these studies across multiple cohorts. NK cells are the immune system's first response surveillance cells, responsible for identifying and destroying virus-infected cells and early-stage tumor cells without requiring prior sensitization. The increase in their activity persisted for up to 7 days following a single exposure, a duration that suggests the terpenes are modulating gene expression in the NK cells, not just temporarily activating them. Then, Li tested the question that changes the picture. Subjects exposed to synthetic alpha-pinene and beta-pinene in a hotel room, at concentrations matching forest air, showed similar NK cell increases without the visual, acoustic, or thermal components of the forest environment. No trees, no canopy, no dappled light, no birdsong, no cool air. Just the chemistry, pumped into a sealed room at the concentration the forest would have provided. The chemistry alone was sufficient. The terpenes were the active agent. That finding is the one that separated the mechanism from the story, because it isolates the immune effect from the experience. The beauty of a forest, the calm of a walk among trees, the aesthetic pleasure of the canopy, all real, all valuable. But the immune modulation was running on the chemistry, not the beauty. The molecules were doing the work. Concentration is not uniform. The compounds are released primarily from the leaves and accumulate in the air column directly below the canopy. Wind measurements beneath the tree canopy show air velocity reduced by 60 to 80% compared to open air. The canopy acts as a windbreak, its thousands of leaves absorbing kinetic energy from the wind and creating a pocket of still air beneath. In still air, volatile compounds accumulate rather than dispersing. The highest concentrations of alpha-pinene and beta-pinene in a park or garden environment are found directly beneath the canopy, exactly where a person would sit. Temperature affects the release rate. On warm days, when you are most likely to seek shade, the stomata are more open, transpiration is highest, and terpene release increases. The tree releases more volatile compounds precisely when the conditions most encourage a person to sit beneath it. The chemistry and the behavior align because both are driven by temperature. You cannot smell the terpenes at the concentrations a single tree generates. The threshold of conscious olfactory detection for alpha-pinene is higher than the ambient concentration beneath a park tree. But the immune system does not require conscious detection. NK cell receptors respond to terpene concentrations well below the olfactory threshold. Immune modulation operates invisibly, compounds entering the lungs with every breath, activating cellular pathways that the person sitting under the tree will never feel happening. What they will notice, if anything, is a general sense of well-being that persists for days after the exposure, attributed to the fresh air, the relaxation, the pleasure of being outside. The fresh air was carrying specific molecular cargo. The relaxation was partly cortisol reduction mediated by the same compounds. The pleasure was real, and the chemistry underneath it was measurable. The chemistry enters through the lungs. The next layer enters through the ears, and the canopy is filtering what reaches them with the same selectivity it applied to the light. Leaves are soft, irregular, lightweight surfaces, the opposite of the hard, flat, reflective surfaces that dominate built environments. When a sound wave strikes a leaf, part of the energy is absorbed by the leaf's flexible structure, part is scattered in random directions by the irregular surface geometry, and part is transmitted through the leaf with reduced amplitude. Absorption and scattering are frequency dependent. Higher frequencies, shorter wavelengths, interact more strongly with the small, irregular leaf surfaces and are absorbed or scattered more effectively. Lower frequencies, longer wavelengths, with oscillation periods too long to interact efficiently with individual leaves, pass through the canopy with less attenuation. The physics is the same principle that governs why a thick curtain muffles high-pitched sounds, but allows bass frequencies through. The size of the absorbing surface relative to the wavelength determines how much energy is captured. Measurements bear this out. A dense canopy of broadleaf trees attenuates sound by roughly 3 to 5 decibels per 10 meters of canopy depth at frequencies above 2000 Hz. At frequencies below 500 Hz, the attenuation drops to less than 1 decibel over the same distance. The canopy is selectively removing the upper portion of the frequency spectrum while leaving the lower portion largely intact. What the canopy creates is a natural low-pass filter. High-frequency sound, the frequencies above 1000 Hz that characterize traffic noise, machinery, construction, electronic devices, and the sharp transients of urban acoustic environments, is attenuated by the canopy. Low-frequency sound, the frequencies below 1000 Hz that characterize wind, rustling leaves, birdsong fundamentals, and the broadband baseline of natural acoustic environments, passes through with less reduction. This filtering matters because the auditory threat detection system responds differently to different frequency ranges. High-frequency transients, sudden, sharp sounds with energy concentrated above 1000 Hz, activate the amygdala's threat monitoring circuits. Urban environments deliver a continuous stream of these transients. Car horns, sirens, brakes, construction impacts, each one briefly activating the threat detection system regardless of whether the conscious mind judges the sound as dangerous. Autonomic cost is cumulative. A person sitting in an urban park without canopy cover receives every high-frequency transient the city generates. Each one triggers a brief sympathetic activation, a microdose of cortisol, a momentary decrease in heart rate variability, a flicker of the vigilance state. Individually, each activation is trivial. Across an hour of exposure, the cumulative effect is measurable. Elevated baseline cortisol, suppressed parasympathetic tone, a body that has been running low-level threat response for 60 minutes without the conscious mind registering a single alarming event. Natural sounds beneath a canopy fall predominantly in the frequency range that the auditory system classifies as safe. Rustling leaves generate broadband noise weighted toward lower frequencies, a spectral profile that the auditory system classifies as safe background. The sound is continuous, unpatterned, and free of the transient spikes that trigger the startle reflex. Birdsong operates differently. It contains higher frequencies. Many songbird vocalizations peak between 2000 and 8000 Hz. But the temporal pattern is melodic and predictable rather than abrupt. Patterned, melodic, high-frequency sound is processed differently from transient, high-frequency noise. A car horn at 3000 Hz is a single abrupt burst. The amygdala classifies it as potential threat. A blackbird singing at 3000 Hz is a repeating melodic phrase. The auditory cortex classifies it as environmental signal, non-threatening. The frequency is similar. The temporal pattern is entirely different, and the autonomic response follows the pattern, not the frequency alone. What this creates is an acoustic environment that is not merely quieter, it is restructured. The frequencies that activate threat detection have been absorbed by the leaves. The frequencies that remain, wind, rustling, birdsong, arrive in temporal patterns. The nervous system classifies as safe. Anyone who finds it easier to think beneath a tree, whose racing thoughts settle, whose body releases tension it was carrying without their awareness, is experiencing this acoustic filtering. The canopy has absorbed the high-frequency components that kept the amygdala active and allowed through the low-frequency components and melodic patterns that the nervous system classifies as safe. 4 layers, each entering through a different sense, each measurable with instruments. But forest research keeps finding autonomic improvements that those 4 layers do not fully explain. The 5th layer is quieter, harder to measure, and it operates through the physics of electromagnetic fields. Urban environments carry a continuous background of artificial electromagnetic radiation. From electrical infrastructure, wireless networks, mobile transmitters, and the wiring inside buildings. The frequencies range from the 50 Hz hum of mains electricity to the gigahertz bands of wireless communication. Beneath a tree canopy, this background is attenuated. Wood and leaf tissue absorb and scatter electromagnetic radiation, and the distance from infrastructure sources reduces field strength. Measurements of ambient electromagnetic field intensity beneath forest canopies show reductions of 40 to 60% compared to open urban environments at the same distance from transmission sources. The tree itself is electrically conductive. Water, the 300 liters transpiring daily through the xylem, is an ionic solution, and the continuous column from root to leaf functions as a conductor connecting the canopy to the soil. The soil, in turn, is connected to the Earth's surface charge. A reservoir of free electrons maintained by the global electrical circuit between the ionosphere and the ground. A tree in contact with the Earth is, electrically, an extension of the ground plane. A person sitting beneath the canopy is in closer proximity to an electrically grounded conductor than a person inside any building, and the background electromagnetic noise of the built environment is reduced. Research measuring heart rate variability and cortisol in forest versus urban environments has consistently found autonomic improvements. Higher parasympathetic activity, lower sympathetic arousal. That the thermal, acoustic, spectral, and chemical differences do not fully account for. The electromagnetic quiet of the canopy environment may be part of the remaining explanation. The evidence is less definitive here than for the other 4 layers. The mechanism is plausible rather than confirmed to the precision of latent heat measurement or terpene immunology. But the physics is real. The field is quieter, the tree is grounded, and the body's electrical systems are operating in a different electromagnetic environment beneath the canopy than beside the building. 5 layers, each one contributing something a building cannot. Evaporative cooling through latent heat of vaporization. The air is thermodynamically different. Spectral filtering through chlorophyll absorption. The light is a different composition. Chemical accumulation through windbreak. Physics. The still air carries terpenes at the highest local concentration. Acoustic filtering through frequency-dependent leaf absorption. The sound environment removes threat frequencies and preserves safety frequencies. And electromagnetic quiet. the attenuation of artificial field noise beneath a grounded canopy. And beneath all of it, a tree that has been running these 5 systems continuously, transpiring hundreds of liters of water through physics that has been operating since the first vascular plants colonized land 420 million years ago. No built structure replicates this. A building provides radiation shade. It blocks photons but does not cool the air, filter the spectrum, manufacture antimicrobial compounds, or acoustically filter threat-relevant frequencies. A parasol blocks radiation. An air conditioner cools air. A HEPA filter removes particles. A noise-canceling headphone attenuates sound. Each of these addresses one function. The tree performs. The tree performs all of them simultaneously, passively, continuously, concentrating every benefit directly beneath its canopy, at the precise location where a person would naturally choose to sit. All 5 layers converge on the body simultaneously. Heart rate variability increases. Cortisol decreases. Blood pressure drops. Alpha wave activity increases. Natural killer cell activity rises. Each of these physiological changes has been measured in studies comparing tree canopy environments to urban environments and to indoor environments. No single layer accounts for the full effect. The thermal difference alone does not explain the cortisol reduction. The acoustic difference alone does not explain the NK cell increase. The effect is the convergence. 5 physical systems operating simultaneously on a body that evolved to function inside exactly this kind of environment. Convergence has a timeline you can track in your own body. In the first minutes, the thermal and acoustic layers register. The body detects the cooler air and the filtered sound environment, and the sympathetic activation that urban heat and noise maintained begins to decrease. Within 5 to 10 minutes, the spectral layer takes hold. Near-infrared reaching the skin stimulates mitochondrial activity. The dappled light shifts cortical oscillations toward alpha dominance. Within 20 minutes, the cardiovascular markers shift measurably. Heart rate variability increases, blood pressure drops, cortisol in saliva begins to fall. Over the course of an hour, the phytoncide exposure reaches the concentrations that Lee's research associated with NK cell activation, immune function improving through a chemical pathway that operates entirely below conscious awareness. Same afternoon, same park, different chair, different physics. For most of the 200,000 years that anatomically modern humans have existed, the canopy was the default overhead environment. The open sky was traversed, crossed between patches of shade, endured during migration, tolerated during the brief exposures that hunting and gathering required. The cave was slept in, but the canopy was where the hours of the day were spent, where food was prepared, where children were tended, where rest was taken, where the heat of the afternoon was endured. Consider what that means for calibration. A nervous system that spent tens of thousands of generations functioning primarily beneath tree canopies was calibrated to every dimension of that environment, calibrated to the temperature profile of evaporatively cooled air, not the dry heat of an open savanna or the radiant warmth of a sun-baked wall, but the specific cool of air from which latent heat has been removed by transpiration, calibrated to the spectral composition of chlorophyll filtered light, the near-infrared enriched UV-depleted spectrum that canopy shade creates, calibrated to the chemistry of terpene-rich, still air beneath leaves, the volatile compounds that the immune system learned to use as a trigger for NK cell activation. Every one of these calibrations was set during a period when the canopy environment was the norm and indoor environments did not exist. Indoor environments are roughly 10,000 years old, a fraction of 1% of the time the human nervous system has existed. Urban environments with no canopy cover are younger still. The mismatch between the environment the body was calibrated for and the environment it now occupies is, in evolutionary terms, instantaneous. A person who spends their day in an office, under fluorescent lighting that contains no near-infrared, in air-conditioned air that has been cooled mechanically rather than evaporatively, breathing filtered air that contains no terpenes, surrounded by hard, flat surfaces that reflect high-frequency sound rather than absorbing it, is operating in an environment that differs from the canopy in every dimension the nervous system was calibrated to detect. The body does not register this as a specific deficit. It registers it as the background state. The mildly elevated cortisol, the suppressed heart rate variability, the beta wave dominance, the low-level sympathetic activation that most people have carried for so long they believe it is normal. It is not normal. It is indoor. The body's physiological response to sitting under a tree is not a preference. It is a recognition. The nervous system encountering the environment it was built for and responding with the recovery state it was designed to enter in that specific constellation of physical conditions. The response is fast because the recognition is deep. The response is consistent because the calibration has not changed. The environment has changed. The body has not. Sit under a tree, not near one, under one, in the still air beneath the canopy, where the cooling is strongest, the phytoncide concentration is highest, the acoustic filtering is deepest, and the spectrally edited light reaches your skin. An hour is enough. No equipment is required. No technique needs to be learned. The thermal shift begins the moment you sit down, the acoustic filtering begins the moment the canopy is overhead, and the immune modulation reaches functional significance within the hour. The physics does not require belief. It requires proximity. The body knows where it is.